The contentious issue of Gerry Adams and the former Sinn Féin president, the alleged and assumed member of the IRA, under Keir Starmer's proposed repeal of sections of the Northern Ireland Troubles Act, will undoubtedly receive a payout. Now, in 2020, the UK Supreme Court quashed Adams' convictions for attempted prison escapes in the 1970s, citing unlawful detention because of administrative failings under the Carl Toner principle. This ruling opened the door for compensation claims, subsequently blocked by the Northern Ireland Troubles Act of 2023, and Labour's plans to repeal sections 46 and sections 47 of this act, following a High Court ruling that the provisions were incompatible with the European Court on Human Rights, have reignited the debate. Well, repeal is very good, but the repeal of these sections of this act should follow the repeal of the Rwanda Act, the repeal of the Nationality and Borders Act, the repeal of the Illegal Immigration Act, which are more ad rem to the issues that we're facing at the moment. At its heart, the Northern Ireland concern pits the principles of human rights against a broader political narrative, and critics, including prominent peers and legal experts, argue that Labour's move undermines the legislative intent to close the door on meritless litigation tied to decades-old events. And the Policy Exchange think tank warns that the repeal could pave the way for up to 400 compensation claims, costing millions in taxpayer money, while reopening wounds in Northern Ireland's fragile reconciliation process. And this case raises an uncomfortable question. Does political leverage expedite justice? Victims of institutional failings such as Windrush and Grenfell endure prolonged battles for acknowledgement and redress, even when the principle is agreed. Meanwhile, figures like Adams, with undeniable political capital and influence, could well secure taxpayer-funded compensation more swiftly. And I think it's important to assess and measure and watch precisely that. This disparity underscores the perception that access to justice is stratified by status and connections in the political world. So there are two big issues here, and the morning press have only isolated the issue of whether or not money will be given to somebody who is accused and was imprisoned on the grounds of being an active member of the IRA. The much bigger question, I think, is whether Gerry Adams' political links means that any form of compensation will be paid up faster than, say, Windrush or Grenfell or Horizon or the infected blood scandals, because that host of dithering tardiness that is demonstrable not only in this government but in in its predecessor, in the Conservative government, throughout years of dithering. That is, I think, the biggest issue to flag up. And as I say, no newspapers have mentioned this, which seems an extraordinary omission. And a particularly thorny issue is the moral quandary surrounding compensation for those suspected of terrorist activities, of course. Suzanne Dodd, whose father was killed by an IRA bombing, expressed outrage, as well she should, at the prospect of Adams receiving compensation while victims remain unacknowledged, and the dichotomy is emblematic of the broader tension between legal accountability and public sentiment. Repealing the relevant sections of the Act risks eroding public trust in the government and in the judicial system. The Carl Toner principle, long a cornerstone of administrative law, is challenged by the Supreme Court's decision. And critics argue that Labour's abandonment of an appeal signals a cavalier disregard for constitutional norms in favour of political expediency. Ultimately, this debate is more than Gerry Adams or human rights law. It's about how a society grapples with its past while maintaining trust into the future for its institutions. Rewriting the legal narrative for select individuals risks undermining the rule of law and the fragile peace established by the Good Friday Agreement. And it opens up questions about how can this particular group that is linked to the political superstructure, how can they engineer support and help when people like, let's say, Andrew Malkinson languish in prison for 17 years, although the evidence is clear that he's innocent, simply because he doesn't have those political connections? Is this about justice, in other words, or does this reflect a broader struggle to reconcile human rights with the legacy of conflict? The outcome of this debate will have profound implications, not just for Adams, but for the moral and the legal integrity and the political integrity of the UK.